Climate Hazard Mitigation Program. At the request of the Puerto Rico State Emergency Management Agency, the Puerto Rico Seismic Network, which is part of the University of Puerto Rico and Miami West, has coordinated the projects and represented the Commonwealth in the program. Now that's a very important little detail. This is unique because the usual model is one of state and local emergency management agencies partnering with a program. In Puerto Rico, however, recognizing that the deep changes in emergency management personnel that occurs after each election cycle put in jeopardy the continuity of the efforts and programs, it was decided to put the partnership, at least developing, in the hands of the university, in particular the Puerto Rico Seismic Network at the University of Puerto Rico Miami West, to give it this continuity in operations. Puerto Rico, after election cycles, if there's a change in a party controlling the state or local government, the changes in personnel go way deep, all the way into operational areas. And that's actually vulnerability. That reduces so it was a way to get around that. The first time to become tsunami ready certified was Miami West, the hometown of the University of Puerto Rico, Miami West, in 2006. Since then, all coastal towns have been certified, and now they're probably undergoing the recertification process. These efforts entail work with all the constituencies that we mentioned above to prepare and distribute tens of thousands of tsunami evacuation maps and prepare tsunami evacuation routes, conducting evacuation drills in schools with exposed areas. Actually, Jorge Iván, when he spoke this morning, he was talking about the seismic risk in Puerto Rico, and this is part of that. Install hazard evacuation signage, provide literally dozens of toxic community organizations and schools in each jurisdiction, organize exhibits, and install all hazard siren systems. A very important detail of this project also is that the investigators also actually did real assessment of the efforts. So in the picture to the left, those circles there are the distance in kilometers from where one of the original all hazard siren was in Miami West. And one of the questions that we asked people in the sample was if they heard it when it went off during a simulation. So we actually mapped that out to see where it was at. Based on that, a second siren was installed, and that one was relocated because we found that people close by couldn't hear. People far away were hearing it, but people relatively close by were not because of topographic effects. Sound travels better over water and whatnot. So all that was captured. Another thing that we found was that our door-to-door efforts were highly effective to get people to learn about the tsunami risk, but the work in schools about, the theory being if we teach the children, the children will teach the parents. Well, that didn't work so much. That was redirected. But that's good. You know, you assess and you figure out what works and what doesn't work, and you customize your appeals in the way you reach out to different constituencies. The final one that I want to highlight is one of the things that I currently did in my new position as dean. We created a disaster studies master of arts and master of science in disaster studies at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. Our first incoming class was in 2016. It's been a highly successful program, growing very quickly. It's a final peer-to-peer relationship that's different from the others because it's not research, it's education, pure education, to improve the capacity of local, regional, and national public and private institutions. At UTIUB, we established this Master of Science program. First incoming class was in fall 2016, and caters mainly to public and private sector managerial professionals. The program increases community capacity, provides for the professional development and advancement of its students, and positions the department and institution in an area of solid enrollment demand. Therefore, absolutely everyone wins. And the decision to have it as a master's level program oriented to this group of professionals was a very conscious one. As academics, we always like to think, let's go for the PhD, let's go for the PhD. But actually, if we want to have an impact on the ground short term, a master's program oriented to people who are already in the public and private sector in these functions and looking for professional development is that will actually have a greater impact short term than the others. So that was a conscious decision. And that's about it, because we're given about 10 minutes to probably wait for perfect. Thanks.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ann Fenton. I'm here from CUNY to talk about the CUNY Service Corps Puerto Rico program. In about April 2018, Governor Cuomo in response to Hurricane Maria, announced New York stands with Puerto Rico. And as part of that program, the governor announced that SUNY and CUNY would be sending students to Puerto Rico throughout the summer as part of a rebuilding program. We had about 7 weeks to put a program together. My colleague from SUNY is here, and I have a colleague from CUNY here. Only 7 weeks to basically build a program and get students on planes to San Juan by the first week of June. And I'll say, when we first launched the program, we really didn't have a lot of details other than we knew we were sending students down there. They were going to be staying somewhere, and they were going to be helping families. And with just that little amount of information, we received, I think the first year, maybe 2,500 applications from students sight unseen. So we knew that there was definitely an appetite for our CUNY and SUNY students to go down there and help, which was really wonderful to see. So we put this program together, and the way CUNY established it, which was we interviewed students. We chose 250 the first year to go down there. We had training programs before we went down there, because what we didn't want to do, and as someone who's worked in disaster recovery before, you don't want to just send people down there and just land them in a community and give them a hammer and have everyone think that they're just going to go down there and save a town. We wanted our students to realize where they were going. We wanted them to know what the culture was going to be like. We wanted them to know the NGOs that they were working with and the families that they were working with. So they sort of really got a sense of what they were doing down there. So we established a program model where we focused on service, where students knew that they were going to go down there for at least 14 days. They were going to be living in dormitories within the communities that they were working on. There was a very strong cultural exchange part of it. So on weekends, we wanted the students to go out into San Juan and other parts of Puerto Rico and actually meet the folks that they were helping. It also, we established a CUNY sort of a leadership program for our students. So it was amazing to go down there. I spent a week, and to see students that 2 weeks before had never picked up a hammer. Some of them had never been out of New York City, and to see young men and young women standing on roofs of houses, basically acting as construction site managers, and it was a real communal program. I think that the reason why it worked so well was because there were really 3 groups of people that this impacted the most. The first group was obviously the people in Puerto Rico, that I would venture to say that our CUNY students would call our sort of Puerto Rican family and friends down there. They had these students in their home. They cooked for them. They did as much as they could to explain sort of their experience. So for every roof that our students fixed, they also spent a lot of time listening to these people, and these people telling them their stories about their community and what it was like to go through Maria. Obviously, the second group of people that were impacted by this in a positive way were our students. One of the hardest things we had to do was tell them after 2 weeks that they had to come home, and to tell most of them that they couldn't really apply for the following year because we had to give other people an opportunity to go down there and experience this. When I was there, every house I went into, the students were as excited to introduce the families to myself and the board members that went down and to share the family stories as they were to talk about and show us the repairs that they had done. And then the third group that was impacted by it was the CUNY community, all of our campuses. We had a CUNY Service Corps program that was started after Sandy. This sort of expanded it. But the fact that no one really hesitated, we didn't have a single college that said, we can't do this, how about if, we'll we'll send some kids from Queens in the beginning, and then we'll jump on in the end. Everybody stepped right up, and everyone saw the value of sending students down there. And then having them come back and meet with other students to talk about not only just the value of working in Puerto Rico, but maybe the idea of what would it be like to work in other countries or in other parts of the United States where disaster relief was necessary. And to also give CUNY and CUNY students, I think, something that they hadn't really had before, which is this notion and this idea of disaster relief as a career, disaster relief as a social justice issue, and this notion that you can leave sort of your backyard of New York City and go someplace and help people and come back and keep it going. And the last thing I'll say, again, as someone who's done disaster recovery, you know, I started with Superstorm Sandy in 2012. And if you go not even that far from Albany and Long Island and parts of New York City, people are still rebuilding and communities are still coming back 7 years later. And to establish a program like this with CUNY and SUNY so that every year we're having students go down there so that 7, 8 years, 9 years from now, when Hurricane Maria sadly is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 storms ago, we will still have students going down there, and we will still have people going into the communities, because there will be 2 and 3 years from now people that still don't have their roofs fixed or their houses lifted. So the value in universities setting up these volunteer programs are when kind of all of the big NGOs, and they have to leave to go on to other projects, we'll still be sending our students down there.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, apologies for the coat, but I'm trying to be resilient. So I would like to talk with you about an island that I think about. It's not Puerto Rico. I haven't actually ever been to Puerto Rico, hopefully soon. But this island here is the Menominee Reservation. You can clearly see it outlined as one that is covered by forests. And outside of that is a lot of agricultural lands. This is located in what is now the state of Wisconsin. But the Menominee Native American Nation was actually much larger land area than this, as you can imagine, and is now there in this reservation. They are actually one of the few tribes in the United States that actually still live within the bounds of their former territories. They weren't physically moved, but their reservation was shrunk. So we were engaged working with the College of Menominee Nation, and there is a Center for Sustainable Development Institute, to work with them collaboratively to try to have them be resilient in the face of future changes, in the face of climate changes in particular, pests and pathogens, windstorms, and other events that are hurting their forests. It's a small land area. They manage it very sustainably, and they would like to continue to do so into the future. So just a couple lessons from that. One of the things that we've learned is the importance of us coming in as academics into a Native American culture. We do have a partner with us who is from the Menominee, and they are a co-PI on our NSF project, so we're not just coming in as complete outsiders, but still you understand that there is baggage coming in as an academic institution with a history of colonialism, and actually many researchers who haven't really trusted the relationship that we were given by working with that community. So we've tried very carefully to build that trust through the years. But still, even with that trust, you are crossing ways of knowing, from traditional ways of knowing to Western science. And so that's always, it's challenging to do, and I imagine it's the same in many places all over the world, and Puerto Rico as well. So actually, can you go back to the previous slide, sorry. So just as we think about this, one of the lessons that's come out of that is not only trust, ways of knowing, but we're actually using storytelling through virtual reality. So how can you know what communities want of the future when the ecology is changing and the community dynamics are changing too? So we're using virtual reality as a portal to have people feel embedded in the communities of the future so that they can make decisions today. And this builds on the storytelling tradition in Native American culture as much as it is, interestingly, bridging Western ways of knowing Western science with traditional science. And I can talk more about that in the future. So the next project, you can click this stupid animation, just keep going one more. Okay. So I actually have done a lot of wildfire science in the western part of the United States, in Yellowstone and the Rocky Mountains. But now that I'm at Penn State, I'm actually engaging with communities and managers in the Mid-Atlantic. There is fire hazard in the mid-Atlantic. New Jersey, for example, has pitch pine systems that are very prone to wildfire, and the New Jersey Forest Fire Service has been managing that system for 100 years with controlled burning. You can imagine a place like New Jersey. If you get a wildfire in New Jersey, it crosses the entire state in 24 hours. It's not like the West, where you have big tracts of federal land. You can take weeks and months even for some of these fires to be put out, and that's kind of okay because you don't have that many populations. Well, we have New Jersey, right? So it's a very different kind of situation. In Pennsylvania, they're now actually trying to put controlled burning on the landscape for habitat protection and restoration. Less so for hazard mitigation, but that's still there. So the managers came to us at Penn State and said, hey, we want to understand what the community is going to think about this, because the communities aren't prepared to think about wildfire or even controlled burning as they might be in the West. So how do we engage with communities in order to make this a sustainable program? So this point I want to make, it was a very manager-driven an enterprise, and we did have the fire science to go in and do this work as a team. So we had developed an interdisciplinary group, social scientists, and natural scientists, and we're working managers, communities, and ecologists, and so on, to try to understand this problem. As an ecologist, I went in and was doing line intercept surveys and focus groups with managers, and really training myself, or retraining myself, how to do team science in this space. And it's been a wild success. We've had videos, I've been doing a lot of outreach on this to work with the communities. So that's one project. So coming out of those experiences, next slide. I know you can't see that now, sorry, but there's two kind of lessons that I would like to share, which is one, the importance of early co-design and co-production, and thinking about the role of academics in this process, like where do we slide in, and hopefully it's not at the end. This says stakeholder involvement being really big at the beginning, academic involvement peaks in the middle, and then might go away towards the end. So, and in that beginning phase, you have that says joint framing of the problem, research definitions and implementation in a co-design process, and then a co-production process. How do you work collaboratively, scientific integration, relevance, and dissemination. And so there's this whole loop that we think about now when we engage in our research projects. How do we fit into that, and where is it appropriate? And then the second comment, as a landscape ecologist, I really have come to see the landscape as the boundary object onto which communities and scientists can engage. And I see many reasons for this, but the first is that it is where pattern and process intersect. So scientifically we understand and can engage in that space. It's also where people and nature intersect. It also has a history of both contestation and cooperation. And it's really the human scale where a lot of management decisions are made. And implicitly, it usually involves lots of institutions and governance structures and different communities. And so you have to work in that transdisciplinary space in order to make a difference in the world. So final thought, we also are launching a new graduate training program, kind of building on a lot of these projects and ideas. It's called Landscape U, but it's funded through the National Science Foundation, their National Research Traineeships, where they really want to re-envision what graduate education is. They have a mission from the higher level agencies of the government to work on professional development and workforce reconfiguration. Not everybody's going to get a PhD, so how do you train them to go out into the workforce? So this is geared towards master's and PhD students, but we're trying to have graduate students learn what it is to do transdisciplinary research. And we have a set of learning outcomes that I'm happy to discuss later. They include things like professional development and science communication, but also things like systems thinking. How do you think about systems? How do you think about interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary work? And as part of that, what about things like facilitation? How do you facilitate dialogue between these different groups, right? Whether they're different academics coming from different disciplines, or it's between different manager groups, or it's between communities and managers. How do you actually train students to facilitate those discussions? Because otherwise, we won't get anywhere, right? So we have a number of learning outcomes tied to that. So this is a 5-year program. We're just in our first cohort year this year, so we're really excited about it. Happy to share more later.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. It's great to be here, and I think this might be just this very timely conference in thinking about the role of universities. The headline of the news today and yesterday internationally is the university in Hong Kong that is part of the protests and has gotten connected with the political tensions and everything, and it's an example of how our universities are can be in the middle of a lot of things going on in society, not just storms, but other kinds of disruptions. And I think I also want to bring to this discussion kind of a bigger, larger picture of where we are in the world right now in terms of, I feel at least that we're in kind of a transformative moment with climate change being elevated as an urgent issue that requires attention, and with the Sunrise Movement and the global youth climate strikes, we're also at a time where people are demanding bigger structural transformative change. So I think we really need to think about the role of universities during this time of change, and a lot of the youth are really demanding change, whether or not they're active on our campuses or not. We're at a point where there's bigger change happening, and for many of us to go along our day-to-day assuming things are going to stay the same is kind of out of touch with reality, because one way or another things are not going to be staying the same. So I want to talk a little bit about this broader framing of climate resilience, energy justice, and collaborative higher ed relationships. And I'll mention this just in terms of my connection with colleagues and friends and peers at the University of Puerto Rico is mostly through actually kind of happenstance connections that kind of highlight the value of our social infrastructure and our networks and all of that. Shortly after Hurricane Maria, I went to a fundraising event in Boston, and I sat next to Ramon Bueno, who's actually on a panel, another panel right now, but he's very good, close friends with Cecilio and Marla, and he suggested we get in touch with them, and then we got in touch with them, and then we've collaborated. Since then we've worked with INESI on their energy justice work, and my colleagues Laura Kuhl and Shalonda Baker have been collaborating with them down in Puerto Rico, and they've come to Northeastern several times, and so I'm just demonstrating the value and the critical nature of our social infrastructure and social innovations that are necessitated by disruptions and disasters. And I think all too often with climate and energy and just in general, we focus on technological innovation and our technological infrastructure, which obviously is critical, but our social infrastructure and our social innovations and our networks and our connectedness is really, really key. So what I wanted to emphasize is kind of the more big picture discussion, and hopefully we'll have time for interactive discussion in this session as well. That really the university, you can think of higher ed as kind of these four areas. Really, they offer research, teaching, and curriculum, the connection with the community, and being kind of anchor organization and the stability that universities often bring to communities. And then the campus itself can be like a microcosm of society, right? That can do innovative things on campus that you might not be able to do in the whole city or the whole community. So there's lots of ways to think about the role of higher ed. And in sustainability and resilience, and especially in this time of transformation, if for those of us who feel that sense of urgency and that things are going to change, there's space for innovation in all of these areas and in connecting the four different categories, right? And many of us probably have lots of examples where we try to connect the different parts, and we've just heard several examples from research and teaching and community and campus from the other presenters here. So when we talk about resilience, I think it's critical to be focusing on vulnerabilities and the inequities in society, and how the concentration of wealth and power and the growing disparities and inequities and injustices always get worse with a disruption. And there's research that shows that after a big disruption, the people who are already well off probably have insurance and they can build back, and they may even get a nicer house at the end after, whereas people who are on the lower socioeconomic side actually have a much harder time and often end up much worse off after. So each disruption, each storm, each disaster exacerbates inequity. So we really need to be thinking about this and the impacts of that, and a lot of even our efforts to help recover oftentimes, again, perpetuate these inequities. So I think it's really important to be very aware of that. At Northeastern, let me just mention, at Northeastern we have established a Global Resilience Institute, which is a university-wide initiative. Northeastern is a big university, urban private university in Boston, and we have a very global mindset. And this is a university-wide investment to encourage interdisciplinary, impactful connectivity within our university, and then also expanding and connecting with other universities. And we have established an international network, which is somewhat similar, I think, to the RISE network, which is focused more domestically, with international universities that have kind of this resilience framing and a commitment to resilience work throughout the world. And if anyone's interested in learning more about that, we can talk and we can look that up, and I'd be happy to share more about that. We also at Northeastern recently got funded to offer a fellowship for this International Humphrey Fellows program, which is where the US government invites mid-career people from all over the world, mostly from countries that the United States doesn't have strong relationship with. Egypt, Morocco, Pakistan, Estonia, and all these countries here, coming to Northeastern for an energy resilience workshop, which is a week-long training that we do. And similarly, what some of the other speakers were mentioning, we really think there's a lot of space in resilience education. And we have a master's program in security and resilience studies. We have another master's program in environmental science and policy. And an innovative one in urban informatics, which is about the data component of integrating data into city resilience. And we do also have a PhD program in School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs, public policy PhD program with a sustainability and resilience concentration. So I think what I wanted to just conclude with are a few other points about collaboration, I think. I was my first faculty job was in 2005 at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I started in the fall, September of 2005, which is right when Katrina hit. It was striking to me how, even though we were far from New Orleans, the impact of that on the campus and our thinking about the role of us as academics, how can we help, what should we be doing, how can we engage, and there's no clear answers, right? People tried different things and tried to connect and give and donate and accept people who were needed to move and all kinds of things. Very similar to how many of us have been engaging and responding with Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. And I think we also all recognize kind of our own vulnerabilities, right, in our own communities. As Boston, yesterday it rained and there was flooding in the whole harbor area in Boston. The streets have water, very common now. It wasn't even like a major storm. It was just raining and a high tide, and you have water in the streets. So in Boston, we have a commitment to collaboration among the universities in Boston. Obviously in Boston there are many universities. We're particularly collaborating with UMass, the University of Massachusetts Boston campus, which is another campus very close to us, right in the center of Boston. And we have since we're a private university, they're a public university, we have different strengths and different synergies. So that's been a very productive way to think about collaboration. And we also have a higher ed working group as part of the Boston Green Ribbon Commission, which is the city's climate action planning and climate resilience planning. So there are roles, for all of us for universities to engage, in that way with the cities and the other higher ed organizations in our cities and communities. So those are some of the examples of the things we're doing, and it would be great to look forward to the conversation and hearing more about questions and comments. Thank you.
Howdy. I come from Texas A&M, that's our mandatory hello. Long title, the role of Texas A&M University System in the College of Architecture. That's my college at Texas A&M University in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. You know, listening to everything I've listened here, I can actually say that a disaster offers a tremendous abundance of opportunities and possibilities for colleges and universities to actually make a difference and do something about it. Especially within their academic missions and missions, there's nothing in disasters that does not align with what we need. Because if we put people first, that's what universities exist for. However, we also face a scarcity of capacity and will to pursue the questions that need to be answered, the problems that need to be solved, the needs that need to be satisfied, the opportunities that we need to realize, and the dreams and aspirations of people that we want to fulfill. So that's kind of my opening statement. But what I want to do here is share with you a little bit of our experience with that. This is the final report of the Governor's Commission for Rebuild Texas. It's accessible from our website. It's a downloadable PDF. And I'm very proud that our college and our university played a very big role. The governor appointed our chancellor to be the czar of recovery for Harvey. And we learned a lot of lessons. And I want to share that with you because talking about real shifts in paradigms, I want to leave you with that seed. So the first lesson is to effectively address disaster preparedness, vulnerability, resilience, and anything else you want. These topics were framed within the context of the statewide institutional ecosystem of the A&M system. And I have been very impressed with the ecosystem of this university, as well as many others that are represented in the room. So if you look at that, that's our chancellor, that's the state of Texas. You can go check it all out. But when you look at 11 universities and 8 state agencies that are part of that system, it's a huge capacity. It's a huge capacity for research, it's a huge capacity for teaching, about 150,000 students, $1 billion of research a year. And this Texas Division of Emergency Management moved from the governor's office to Texas A&M as a result of the good job that we did. Fortunately, it came with its budget, so that was good. Second, when you start mapping it in a state like Texas, all our assets, it has a geographical reach. When you look at our presence in every single one of 250 counties out of 254 through our AgriLife extension, that's a living laboratory that is unparalleled. So that's one thing. So I want to make the analogy of the ecosystem in which we live. Ecosystems are not all identical. So that the diversity and the differences of everything that goes there, so those are 11 universities and 8 state agencies. The second lesson is more down to earth. The Texas A&M University, again, but this time is the context of the general institutional system. So Texas A&M has a president, and Texas A&M has a very large campus, and Texas A&M right now is about